So we're all live. Um, and I'm going to say the normal stuff here. I'm going to turn off the caption that says we're on mute because we're not on mute. We're live. Oh, I can now hear myself, so I better turn myself off. So we're all live. Oh no. I'm hearing myself through 4 different devices. I'm going to turn off the
We knew
that says
that
we're
had
on
to happen at
mute
least
'cause
once
we're not on
tonight.
mute. It always happens. And I can now hear myself, so I better turn myself off. All right, so let's get that. Hit mute. We're all live. There. Oh no. Hit there. And now we'll start the recording. That way I don't have to edit this in the future. So
Okay. We knew that had to happen at least once tonight.
It always happens. It's running on a device somewhere. Hang on. All right, so let's get that. Hit mute. There. There we go. Turned off all 4 channels. Hey, Bob. So welcome to Gherkin Coders. Here's our normal disclaimer. We are a complete nonprofit. We have no money. We don't need money. We run on story points and happiness. Our story points are just paying out a lot right now. Bob thinks we have about 14 trillion story points. Is that true, Bob?
Oh, at least.
And we're a complete nonprofit. We are rebroadcasting. So if you're on the Zoom and you don't want to be rebroadcast, just keep yourself on mute. Keep yourself video off, and you won't be rebroadcast. If you're watching us at a later time, there's a link down here that says slack.cantoncoders.org. Everything you do is 100% free. Join that community. We have close to 700 people in that Slack channel, and our mission is happiness. We don't care if you code in a closet with your toes. We don't care if you do waterfall. We don't care if you're PMP certified, SAFe certified, Agile certified, uncertified, self-certified, or drinking beer with Scott Hammer. You are welcome here as long as you want to be happy. Tonight we get to have fun with Camille. Camille is amazing. Camille has done about everything in computer programming that can be done, I think. And Camille's going to teach us Given When Gherkin. And Given When Gherkin is one of her favorite things. And she is going to do the talk of talks that 5 years from now, when you're watching this video and I have less hair, it's probably not going to change that much. And we're thrilled to be able to record this for computing history and for the community. Anything else I should add, Camille, before we go? Oh, wait. How do you want questions, Camille?
I think they'll probably come up as we go.
So can they shout them out, signal them?
Yeah, you can shout them out.
ASCII or Unicode?
Voice.
Okay. Cool.
Analog.
I'm going to take my dad jokes and I'm going to go on mute so I can make sure I get everything working computing wise. And thank you, Semaphore. Someone has a computer joke.
Okay.
Awesome. Looking forward to your talk tonight, Camille. And by the way, next Wednesday, we're going to do the second half of this. This will be the master class on Gherkin. It's probably the best Gherkin talk on the internet. So if you didn't know you signed up for it, you're going to be live. And William, you'll be on it forever. Thank you, Camille.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank Gherkin Coders for inviting me. It's always a delight to be here. So I'm now going to share my screen. You're going to see my extraordinarily messy desktop, and we're going to get started. Okay, slideshow, play from start. All right, so this is Given When Gherkin. We're going to be talking about specification by example. We're going to talk about a number of things. I guess I should say a little bit about me. So I'm an Agile coach, primarily focus on the technical these days. It's almost been 5 decades in IT now. Here's how to contact me. And I post all my public slides to SlideShare, so you'll be able to see. But on the other hand, you're going to have a video of this. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about for about 2 seconds. And that is that, as I see it, Agile is about 2 major things, and actually all software development is kind of when you get around it and you're focusing on building the right thing and building the thing right. Now, there are all sorts of software engineering and technical practices that are based on building the thing right. Test-driven development, which I dearly love, refactoring, lots of wonderful stuff there. That's where, DevOps comes in and all those things. Tonight, we're going to focus on building the right thing, but there's also going to be a technical side to it as well, which we're going to get into. So, we're going to talk about specification by example, and it's got lots of different names, which we'll get to. But what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a collaborative approach for finding out what your requirements are. Now, I tend to come from the Agile world, so we call them user stories, but you can call them George. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that we get some really good acceptance criteria for those, and they've got concrete examples. These are your functional tests, not your unit tests, very high level ones, and they're going to be executable. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because documentation stinks and it gets out of sync with what you're doing. But if you've got executable specs, then if your code and your specs ever get out of sync, the tests fail and you know right away. And it may have been because some requirement changed that you put in your code and you didn't put in your specs, but more likely it's because you did something that broke what you were trying to do. Okay, what was needed by your business or your warfighter or whoever your customer is. Okay. So there are many names that we use for the same thing here. Specification by example, behavior-driven development. That tends to be the word that most developers use. Acceptance test-driven development. That's a word, a phrase that often formal testers use. Story-driven development and story testing. Story testing was one of the early names for this, and one of the earliest executable versions. But we're going to call it specification by example, and later we'll talk about BDD, behavior-driven development. The differences between these is very, very little. Okay. As I say, I come from the Agile space, and we call our requirements user stories. And some people go into a great deal of consideration about whether it's a story or an epic or a novel or who cares. They're all just different sizes of the same sort of thing. And the smaller the size, the more, concrete it is. But let's look at an example of one. What is a good thing to have? Well, you need to have a title. Now, if you're using one of these Agile project management tools or what have you, they'll give you JIRA numbers, or rally numbers or version 1 numbers. Do not use that. Title, something anybody walking into or getting onto Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever with you can see from the title what you're talking about. 2 to 7 words, good size. Then we're going to talk about why. Why do we care about this? Who is our customer? Who is the user of this thing? And what is it we're trying to build? If you're familiar with the classic Agile phrasing, this is a little bit different, and I'll tell you why this is a better approach. You'll see as we go. Now, Ron Jeffries, who is a really great guy and really smart, calls the approach to trying to get these things the 3 C's: the card, the conversation, and the confirmation. The reason I call it a card is because originally user stories were written on 3x5 cards. Conversation is kind of obvious, and the confirmation is now how we get those specs into detailed form. This comes from extreme programming. This, by the way, is an example of at least it was at the time, of how the Fannie Mae mortgage calculator actually worked with real data. And the data is going to be important. So let's think about this. We want to have multiple points of view when we're looking at these stories, or we're looking at these requirements, or we're looking at these Georges, whatever you want to call them, these things that we're trying to build for somebody. We want the point of view of the folks developing the code. It's our wizard hat here. We want the point of view of whoever your end customer is, your business person. If you're in the military, your war fighter, whoever that is. The bow tie is my symbol for that. And we want a testing point of view, and whether or not, if you have formal testers, great. If you don't have formal testers, then one of your devs or somebody else needs to put on this, and how can this go wrong point of view. Okay. And most devs don't think that way. Most devs think happy path. So this mindset is important. Now, what are we looking at? Who's going to use this? How is it going to be used? How do we describe it? How do we build it? How do we confirm, and this is where our specs come in, that it's going to work? And do we really need this thing? Important question. And of course, how do we break it into smaller pieces? Now, this approach of pulling these three mental concepts, and sometimes you'll need to bring in a database person or somebody else with expertise in addition. It may be 4 amigos, it may be 5. Ideally, and in the mob programming environment, it's the whole team, including your business folks. But you at least need these multiple points of view. And we're going to get specific examples with concrete data. We're doing this from the outside in. And that is where, if you're familiar with behavior-driven development, that's where that concept is also as an outside in. Unit tests are kind of the other way around. Yes?
Couple of things. Outside in can also be thought of as the London School of TDD.
Good point.
And the other thing is that the who wants what and why they want it actually has a name. It's called the Connextra pattern. Okay. Which I didn't know for the longest time, but discovered it and have been able to quote it since.
Excellent points, Bob. Okay, so let's focus on the why. Because that's our business person. So traditional user stories, if you're familiar with those, are as a I want so that puts the why last. That's a mistake. You want to put the why first. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Well, 1, it gets left out. 2, it's useful for prioritization. And 3, when you focus on the why, you may discover other things are different. Important. Well, now, one of the things, remember, that we want to, in focusing on the why, is, do we need this? Why are we doing it? So this particular example here is from a Standish study in 2002. Things have improved slightly, but not a whole lot. The Standish group interviewed thousands of companies, tiny ones, huge ones, intermediate ones, profit, nonprofit, government, all sorts. And what they found in fully developed applications, things that were delivered to the end users, we're not talking about things that were shelfware or not delivered, is that 20% of those features that people asked for were really, really valuable. They were often used. They were always used. And 64% of them were either never used or rarely used. So you can get a lot of value just about thinking and prioritizing and not doing what is mostly waste. Now, once in a while, some of those things that you never expect to use, you must have. Sometimes it's for regulatory purposes. Sometimes it's the emergency shutoff software that controls a nuclear power plant. Never hope to use it, but it needs to be there. But most of the time, that's just garbage you don't need. So the first thing you can do into becoming more efficient is to get rid of that. And besides which, your end customers, your business people, your warfighters, whoever they are, your consumers, the nonprofit folks that you're working for, they will come up with new things that they want, which are going to be more important than what they said they wanted 6 months ago. Anyway, so deliver when as fast as you can, good stuff, and get feedback on what's really valuable. Okay, so that's an important part of the why. Now, I mentioned that how we do this why is also important to put it first. So here's a classic format. As a software team manager, I want the application to be free of SQLs so that my app will pass check marks. Check marks, if you didn't know, is one of the software tools that checks for things like SQL injection and various other possible security issues. So why? Why is it important to pass that? Well, because passing it prevents security threats and cyber attacks. Why is that important? Because successful cyber attacks put the business at risk. Ransomware, data breach, and other things. Why does that matter? Because if we don't protect it, we lose money on our investment. Okay? Business people care about that. So value last. Don't do that. Turn it the other way around. And when you turn it the other way around, in order to protect my investment from cyber attacks, as a stockholder or whomever the appropriate business user is, I want my application to be free of SQL injection and a variety of other things as well. But putting that why first changes everything. We've changed who our user is. Here's another one. Now, hopefully you don't have to write little stories or things to refactor your code, yet you refactor it as you go. But let's say that then in some cases that you did. And so our story title, Refactor Big Ball of Mud. As a programmer, I want to refactor the big ball of mud code so that my code is simpler. And your business person goes, don't care. Okay? Because they don't understand why that's important. The why needs to be there. So why is it important that code's simpler? Because simpler code is easier to change and maintain. So why is that important? Because we can create new features faster than code is easy to change and maintain. And why is that important? Because we can bring new features faster to market at lower cost. Oh, hey, there's something a business person cares about. You can do this with anything that you're trying, that the why has been put. So always put it in front. So in order to deliver new features at a lower cost, as a CFO or some other applicable user, I want the big ball of mud code refactored. So putting the why first matters. Now let's look at who. Now there are all kinds of who's out there, depending what your customer is. And we're going to look at some examples, assuming that there's some sort of taxi service, this kind of not exactly an Uber, but it's something or other that uses local taxis, and maybe they use Uber or not. We have a couple of different types of people. By the way, I like to alliterate names of these personas that we call them, because there's more than one type of person that uses your app. And it's really easy to remember the name if it's alliterated. I picked that up from David Hussman, who maybe invented it, maybe picked it up from someone else. Anyway, so Laura, she's local, and her description, there's many ways to do personas, by the way. This is one of the simplest. She's a local traveler, travels alone. She goes to and from home, mostly to the grocery store. She has a preferred taxi service that she likes better than some others. She does some home, but she wants to be picked up at home. The taxi needs to have room for bulky bags and needs to take care that the eggs are not broken. Needs hometown service. Bob Business, on the other hand, needs a taxi service, but he is very different. He's a businessman that travels nationally. He travels alone to and from airports and to his house, of course, and to his hotel. He's usually carrying 2 pieces of luggage. He really cares about receipts because he has the world's worst expense report system that he has to maintain. Laura doesn't care. He also wants early morning pickup. Laura's not a morning person. He needs to book the night before. Laura maybe could book weekly and be happy. He wants room for luggage, and he wants something that will be workable at the airport. Not all services go to all airports. Here's a different type of application. And again, these are both people that use the service, but they've got different needs. So they're different personas. Both of them are going to eat at restaurants or bring people to eat at restaurants. Now, Fred Father, he's a family man, eats out monthly. He's married. He has an 8 and a 14-year-old and a toddler. Some of us might know about having little kids into restaurants. It's an interesting challenge. He's a beer, steak, and potatoes guy. He wants moderate prices, a children's menu, a high chair for that toddler who's always squirming, and he wants same-day reservation. Brandy Banquet's different. She's an event planner. She reserves space months in advance. Weddings, business organizations, fraternal groups, all sorts of things. Okay. And she orders food weeks in advance after she's found out what the guests want. She may bring in entertainment. She wants a private room. She doesn't want to be in with the rest of the mob at the restaurant. She wants her group of people separated. She wants group discounts because she's bringing in lots of people. She wants, in many cases, a dance floor, but maybe not all of them, and a wine list, fine cuisine, vegetarian option, and a buffet option. So some of her events are plated and other events are buffet. So each person we saw here has a description and what they value. Now, what we're going to do, this is our first exercise, is we're going to look at either Jane Job Seeker, somebody trying to get a job, or Russ Recruiter. Okay, and that's somebody trying to hire. And we're going to look at a description for that person and what they value. Now, what would you all like to do? Would you like to work on Jane Job Seeker or Russ Recruiter?
Russ Recruiter has money, Jane Job Seeker doesn't. So target market, Russ Recruiter.
Everybody agree? I don't hear any other voices.
Bob must like a paycheck.
What?
Bob must like getting paid to work.
Well, it's handy, yeah.
And it's okay to hop off mute if you want to and interrupt, right, Camille?
Yes,
it's actually
please.
Kind of required to be successful tonight.
Yeah, so we're going to want some folks to, we're going to want more than just Bob's voice, please.
Please.
But
Okay.
Bob does have a lovely voice.
Yes, that may be, but okay, so I'm going to escape from this.
I'll try to do Bob's voice.
Okay. And now, so Russ Recruiter, is that what we all decided on?
Here.
Or Jane Job Seeker, okay? All right. Tell me about Russ. What's he like? What's him? This is where you're supposed to participate, gang.
I'll show him up. Russ,
Yeah, Russ Recruiter. Okay.
he wears
What's
glasses.
he like? Huh?
He wears glasses.
Okay.
Enjoys facial hair.
That's
Plays golf.
plays golf.
Sends lots of emails.
Okay, that sounds like that. Golf. Okay.
Uses a Dvorak keyboard.
Oh,
Now we're all judging him.
that's Camille Coder.
So I'm thinking in terms of restaurant accoutrements, once a
No,
private
this
pickle
Russ Recruiter. This is for job site.
for Russ Recruiter,
Mm-hmm.
what is it we're saying? What their
What-
characteristics is? or
Tell,
what
yeah.
the-
What? So let me show you some prior examples. So for Fred Father being a family man and eating out
Okay.
monthly was relevant. The fact he had kids was relevant. For Brandy Banquet, the fact that she was an event planner was relevant. And that brought into some of the things that she was going to care about. So my guess is wears glasses probably not going to be it, but sending lots of emails might. What are going to be other things about him in relation to being a recruiter that we know about Russ?
For a job site, right? We're building a job site.
We're building a job site. Okay. This is
I
He-
missed the pivot too.
what? Sorry.
I missed the pivot too. I was just
Okay,
kind of putting
yeah,
things on the background.
Does he hires software developers?
Okay, that sounds relevant.
He doesn't like cat encoders because we do a free career fair and it puts him out of business.
Has a business degree, not a computer degree.
Okay.
That's not my experience.
Good. Can we split it and do both? Has a business degree or a computer degree?
Yeah. Most
Uh,
recruiters don't
A
know
lot of
beans
them have
about software.
humanities degrees too. So
He prefers Firefox.
Okay.
Talks to a lot of different people.
It'd be nice if I could spell.
is a
Single.
good time manager.
Single, lives in Amber Apartments.
He has a budget of $6,000 a year to spend on software for recruiting.
Okay. All right.
And that software has to integrate with a lot of things like CRM and LinkedIn, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of other recruiter sites.
Whoops. Okay. It's so uses linked in, and what else was that?
Microsoft Dynamics.
We're just thinking CRM, customer resource manager or
Right.
relationship manager,
Oh,
APM,
Leak
applicant
Code,
tracking manager.
because he talks to hire software developers, Leet Code, LEETCODE.
What's that?
It's a competitive ranking kind of thing for developers. They compete against one another. Leet Code.
Oh, okay. So he uses lead code.
Yeah, he uses that to find 10x developers.
Lead code or lead
Lead.
code?
Leet, like Haxer.
Like that?
LEET.
LEET. Okay. I have
Yes.
not heard of that. Excuse me.
Only works from an iPad.
Uses
Oh, he does. Okay.
Yeah.
iPad.
On a cell phone modem.
Okay,
3G.
now we're in the weeds.
Okay, so let's think about how some of these things relate to what he's okay. So it must what if so he uses prefers Firefox. What does that mean that he's going to value? He uses Firefox on an yeah, he can use Firefox on iPad. Sure
Ad
he can.
blockers.
Well, I don't know. I use Chrome on a Mac. I assume you can use Firefox on an iPad.
He probably just wants it to work in Firefox, whatever it is.
Okay, so what does it value as far as the app is concerned?
He likes to use custom plugins from Firefox.
Okay. Okay, so support.
You could have gone more extreme on this. He likes to use Internet Explorer 6 or something.
It won't work on the iPad anymore, Bob.
Okay.
Oh, no, for that, I
Alright.
would upgrade to Internet Explorer 8.
So what about emails? How is that going to relate to what it's going to value about this web app we're going to call? Okay.
He doesn't want to send emails anymore.
Okay. Doesn't want to send emails manually.
Yep.
Wants
Automatic email generation or something.
okay.
That appears real.
It's a good point. Okay. So do we want to have integration within LinkedIn?
He wants single sign-on. He doesn't want to remember his passwords.
Just I'll put single sign on. Okay.
You can see the sales pipeline.
What's that?
You can see the steps in the pipeline towards closing. A dashboard of status of different racks.
Okay, good. Okay, dashboard. Okay.
Only wants to work 4 hours a day because he likes to play golf.
Okay. All
That's
right.
why he has a cell phone modem, Bob.
Okay.
He works between holes. That works between tea times.
Hang on. Want sufficient apps.
And the reason I said golf is because somebody once told me that lawyers play golf, but programmers play frisbee golf. It sort of sets a level. You know, programmers drink beer, the other ones drink wine. So, you know, drives a good car, plays golf, kind of sets a kind of person.
Doesn't require
With
overtime.
Wears glasses, he needs to be able to zoom because he doesn't have good vision.
Oh, that's a good point.
He needs accessibility.
Okay. Need Zoom feature. Wants
So point hotels would do well to do with their shampoo and conditioner bottles. Thank you very much. Plus 50 for me.
okay, this would be actually okay. What's important about hiring software developers?
Needs a keyword buzzword count feature.
And a place to get code repositories. Sample code, portfolio. Is this what it's like to be a product manager, Bob? You just get to make stuff up all day?
Okay.
This is what it feels like to. Oh, I see what you're saying. I think we're all poking fun at recruiters that we've known.
James and
By the way,
Julie,
you're
we
the
have a big
first
heart for
group
you.
that's chosen the recruiter. Everybody usually chooses the
Top
person
secret.
that wants to get a job. Okay, uses iPad, so it must work across platform.
And horizontal and vertical
Oh, and
mode.
Android. Because there's more than one kind of a pad.
But Russ is an
Okay.
iPad person. He's an Apple user.
Well, I assume that, and I think it's actually it's lower I, capital P.
Yep.
I think I got that backwards.
I think you now have it correct. Or about to.
There we go. That looks better. Okay, obviously,
Is it less than $6,000 a year or has to provide value?
well, his budget is $6,000 a year. What's that relate to actually his budget for software?
It has to add more value to what he's trying to do. So if he spends
Yeah.
$5 on it, he needs to be able to make 6.
Is where you're going, you need to be able to justify $6,000 worth
Yep.
of savings per year.
Yep.
Ah,
Yeah, there you go. Needs to generate enough money to pay for itself.
That's practical.
Bob, you must be a senior product manager.
God, no.
Principal senior? Principal senior
We-
associate fellow?
We suggested
Okay.
Rally, we got Jira
all
for that
right.
same reason.
Okay. Does the business degree really trigger anything for folks?
Lights charts.
Okay,
Um,
sure.
you might.
I meant it to be about, they focus on dollars and don't know technology so much, but there are technology ones and there are humanities ones. So
Okay.
the reason I said it,
And what about talking to lots of people? So he wants some feature where he can directly focus, interview folks?
Interview recommendation feature. How about that?
How about that?
Doesn't want to use his phone either. Just wants to use the iPad.
Okay. So you see how this works. And we probably spent more time than I allocated.
But it was
for
fun,
But
right,
anyway,
Bob?
It was fun.
It was interesting. Yes.
It was different.
the iPad with Firefox on it. Come on, Joel.
Yeah, okay, so this is not the most realistic example, but all right, back to here. Okay. Doom. All right, we worked in a group. So now the what? One of the things that it's important to recognize is the difference between the business need and a constraint.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah.
Like, we'll be happy to make a wonderful app, but it's not free because we can't make any money on that.
Well, okay. So
The customer may want it free, but the stakeholders clearly don't want to do it for
so
free.
constraints can be important,
Okay?
but it's important to recognize which is which. So it is a business need to make money. Okay, that is a business need. At least for most businesses. But let's see. Here's an example one. Let's look at the second example. A lot of colleges and universities require that master's degree candidates have to write a thesis. But the real need is that they have to demonstrate mastery of their subjects. And there's more than one way to do that.
Interesting.
A constraint is that you have to use the Oracle database. The need might be that the analyst wants to be able to perform ad hoc queries, and there's several other things that database systems and tools that could do that. Now, if you already have Oracle in place and you're going to pry it away from the DBAs over their cold dead fingers, then that constraint may be a really true thing, but you need to recognize it's not the same thing as your need. You may discover later that there's certain things that maybe MongoDB would be better for. You don't even need a relational database. So recognizing the difference between these two things. A constraint would be what programming language you have to write in if that's already specified. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you
Camille,
have
what
flexibility.
I detect here, tell me if I'm on the right track. Constraints are closed by nature, narrow-mindedness, effectively, to put a not nice description of it. And the business needs are more open-ended,
Mhm.
allowing for more flexibility.
But often business folks, and particularly if they've gotten a technical background, don't differentiate between the two. And it's worth bringing that up.
Fair.
Another thing is a difference between a how and a what. This was particularly true when people were, if you've ever seen, if you're old enough to have ever seen the horrible shell statements and some really bad waterfall documentation. Not that there aren't some decent apps that have been written in waterfall, but there's also, I have seen a 9,000 page, and I kid you not, requirement stock in Microsoft Word. Yeah, it was pretty awful.
Wow.
And a lot of that confused the how with the what. So it's important to recognize the difference between the two of them. When you see someone telling you exactly how you have to build something, now, again, you may have architectural constraints that tell you how some things have to be done. But look at the what it is you're trying to build. See, don't narrow the field so much that your developers don't have any room for creativity. That doesn't mean that you can't have standards, but it does remember, it is important to recognize the difference between the two of them. So if the business need is that monetary transactions need to be into tens of billions of dollars, floating point may not be big enough. If it's a very small amount of money, integer where you're counting pennies might be better because it will give you a more accurate number.
When
So
you're
it's
defining requirements, you shouldn't be talking about any of the how at all. That's up to someone else, the developers.
right, but you will see that in certain circumstances. So our next thing is to discuss what these where you have hows and what's confused. Have you seen constraints confused with business needs? Have you ever seen the how you should do something confused with what's really needed? This is a discussion. What
Oh,
examples
yes.
can you think of? No one's ever seen this, really?
I've seen it, but I'm creating space for others to contribute.
Okay.
I agree.
Example?
I was seeing if someone else wanted to talk, and we have some new college graduates out here too. So maybe they don't have an experience.
Yeah, you may not have run into this yet.
And hopefully you never will.
If you're lucky, you won't.
So a really concrete example that anyone can wrap their head around, because everyone's had the experience of standing in front of a vending machine and making a purchase.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to describe the business need as what button to push and what label is on it and how to accept money, as opposed to I need to sell product for XYZ amount and the customer needs to get their product. You didn't say a thing about how they selected it, how they paid, or how they got it. The latter is business need. I need to actually make money, not push the green button in the upper right that has the word Coke on it, and then insert money in the slot with the label so-and-so. That isn't relevant to what, that's relevant to the implementation details, which you don't want to get yourself into.
Other examples?
I worked at a startup where the chief CTO in a startup of 5 believed that we had to scale to 1 million users and had to use a certain technology, although we only had one paying customer. And he was over-indexing on the what of technology versus building features simply people that would give us money would pay. Does that work for you, Camille?
That could be. I mean, you may want to think about how to scale, but that's certainly not where you're going to want to start
We
with.
had 1 user. We figured by the time we'd have 10, we'd know a lot more.
Uh-huh.
Not a million. We didn't care about a million.
Any other examples that folks have seen?
Scott has never had an example like this, Camille. He's never written a line of code in 30 years.
Oh, yeah, right.
He also talks on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Scott.
Yeah, I might have one. So recently, there was a team that wanted to extract a piece of their functionality as a shared service.
Okay.
But it was built on an Oracle database, and an architect flew in and said, you can't do it because you've got to switch over to Postgres. All new stuff has to be in Postgres. And was citing business reasons for that rather than, the truth was it's an architectural constraint. Is that close?
Okay. Yeah, that's a constraint issue.
Mm-hmm.
Was the constraint based on something pragmatic from the business's perspective? Like, we already have a license for Postgres. We don't want to pay the license for X, Y, or Z.
Now, Postgres is free.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Oracle is
Oracle is not.
less than free.
Oracle's the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the business need is I don't want to keep paying for expensive databases.
Or the classic one, Camille, is architects who probably aren't writing the code, describing how the code should work. Is that a constraint versus a business need?
Architects who don't write code, in my opinion, are not nearly as good architects as they should be.
But they're welcome here at Canton Coders because as long as you
They're-
want to be
because
happy.
they'll get better. They're absolutely welcome. Now, I've known a number of architects who do write code, and they're good. All right. Okay.
Oh, I actually have one too.
Sure.
Place where I was before, we had a bunch of little bugs that needed fix. When we clicked this, it didn't, do the right thing. And the constant reply was, we can't fix that. We need to rewrite everything because it's in VB6. So we'll work on that later.
VB6 is my retirement plan.
Okay. Very good.
I have a.
Yes.
It's sort of tangential, but since I just jump in, let me pretend like I know what's going on for a couple minutes. I've seen a lot of teams that I've worked with and led where they start including the how onto their user stories as requirements because they use story points as an attempt to understand complexity, or let's just say they use something to understand the complexity of the work they're doing. And so the devs themselves start putting in how into their own requirements, because they're like, well, I need, we need to tell the team how complex this is so they know what they're dealing with. You know what I mean?
Well, that's good for a discussion. And in my opinion, the value of story points, where they have value, is in having that discussion. So that's worthwhile them telling them, but not putting in the user story. That's part of a discussion of, well, you could do it this way, or we could do it that way. Oh, this way is a whole lot easier or faster or more secure or whatever, because, and that's part of a good discussion, but that's not a business issue per se.
Speaking of which, if you'd like to donate your extra unused story points to Cat Encoders, go ahead and reach out to Bob Allen. He will be giving you a gift receipt of story points.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to work on the confirmation part. Okay. So we've talked about the why, the who, and the what. Now we're looking at how are we verifying that this is true. And the first part of that is to figure out what some of the things are that we might do. So here's another real world example of talking to people. And again, we're collaborating. So in order to show a confirmation of a sighting, a US CERT analyst, I want to mark a sighting as vetting. Now, a sighting is some kind of a malware that somebody thinks they have. And there's this US agency called US CERT, and they examine possible things that are coming in, and they have an app that tells them whether or not it really is dangerous, or whether it was not. Okay. So WannaCry is a sighting viewed by Charlie, a US CERT analyst. You see, and Charlie marks it as vetted. Tracy from Treasury then picks this up and then looks at it. So we're sort of working in our flow as we're discussing this. Searches for sightings that are vetted today, and Tracy sees that WannaCry, which was a really nasty thing, and there's lots more nasty things out there, has been confirmed. From that, we can start creating a whole bunch of executable tests, looking at features, and we're going to use these words a little differently than you perhaps use them, because we're talking about Gherkin. We're starting to talk about Gherkin now. And it uses the word feature where some people might use the word user story. Anyway. But again, features come in different sizes. User stories come in different sizes, whatever. So here we have several different ones. Trusted partner finds unvetted. Trusted partner finds a vetted sighting. The analyst vets the sighting. And, there's scenarios for unvetted and scenarios for vetted. Okay. And this can be automated. This is not actually the real thing running. This is my software simulating it in the background. This brings us to the cycle. Now we said the specification example by example and behavior-driven development were two words for the same thing. And they have a cycle it goes through, which is very similar to the cycle that test-driven development goes through. Where first we create our scenarios, okay? Then we haven't written any code for. Maybe we create several of them, but anyway, because there is no code, they will fail. This is important. Likewise, in test-driven development, when we're working down in the unit level, We write our tests, whether they're in NUnit or JUnit or RSpec or a bunch of other things. We write them before we write the code and they fail. Then we write the code, and if it's unit level, it's very small bits of code. We clean, and we get that to passing, which is green. And then code gets messy over time and we refactor it. We run the tests again. And the cycle continues until we have enough that we've got that whole feature. And then that feature that we have, or that scenario rather, that's part of a feature, is now passing. And occasionally that needs to also get refactored. And we'll talk about that later in our next session, in how we clean up messy Gherkin that's working. Okay, so there are two sides to this. There's a business facing side and a technology facing side. We are going to focus on the business facing side as we're focusing on Gherkin, but it is important to know that there's more than one. I work mostly with Cucumber. SpecFlow is Microsoft's name for the same thing. I have no idea why it's called SpecFlow. I believe that there's another one that's called Behave. I'm trying to remember.
Python.
Python. Yeah, that's the Python version. Anyway, it comes in at least a dozen different programming language variations for the technology facing side. The Gherkin stuff is all the same. At least it's all the same if you're doing it in English. And there are other countries that have translated Gherkin into German or French or what have you. But anyway, so on the business facing side, it's simple English, but it's structured simple English, which we'll talk about. In business terms, it promotes collaboration. It uses examples with concrete data. And I can't emphasize this enough, is the concrete data part. It proves that the business needs have been met, and it's an executable specification.
Say,
So,
Camille,
yes,
it might be worth mentioning that there is a keyword in the Gherkin language which allows for generic rules, and it's actually the rule keyword.
we'll get to that.
Okay.
We will get to that next session, not this session, but yes,
Okay.
that's a true thing. And it helps organize things. This session, we're going to work on the very basics. Next session, we'll get into lots of other things. And they're modifiable and reusable. Now, on the technology facing side, that's the part that exercises the underlying software. That's the part that you've written in Java or C# or Python or whatever you've written it in. You can connect it to browsers, networks, database frameworks, and so on. Although generally speaking, you probably want to do less connecting to browsers and more below the browser level. It's object-oriented generally, extensive test libraries. I found out there's even a version that works with Delphi, of all things. Modifiable and reusable. And if you have no preference, whatever, I like using Ruby as the implementation language because it's really easy to learn, but you can, whatever your team is most familiar with, there's almost certainly an implementation in that. This is the Cucumber stack in Ruby, but generally speaking, you'll find a stack similar to that in whatever programming language you're using. On our business-facing side over here, we have features, scenarios, and steps. We'll talk about those in some detail. On the technology side, we have our step definitions written in whatever programming language you're using. It'll have a bunch of support code also written in whatever programming language you're using. A number of things will be automatic, and some automation libraries will use. The Gherkin part will remain the same regardless. And that's the last part we'll talk about technology for the most part. Again, Three Amigos approach, we've mentioned that before. So there's lots of good ways to work on how you figure out what your real requirements are. I like story mapping. That is basically sort of walking people through how your features are going to get used by your customer. And that can create a lot of different smaller stories or smaller requirements, whatever you want to call them.
Oh, I don't know.
The thing that classical user stories don't mention is that how one story relates to another, and they do relate to each other, and that's important. Anyway, so when we think about these, they can give us a look about what our categories of our test scenarios are. Later, we'll talk about, that will be today, on given, when, then, and we'll want to make sure how there's concrete data. Let's see how that works. Okay. So
on Juno,
we talked about
using Juno,
you know, the why, the who, and the what.
You're gonna get your money all stolen.
Now this is a really high level one. In order to conduct banking when the bank is closed as bank customer, I want to use the ATM. Well, that may be true, but that doesn't tell me much. This is gigantic requirement.
Oh.
So breaking it down a little bit further, there are various subcategories. We've got cash withdrawal, check deposit, transfer savings to savings, transfer to checking. This assumes we have multiple accounts. Let's look a little closer at the cash withdrawal. Okay. Again, that's pretty vague. In order to get on the bank customer, I want to withdraw when the ATM, cash withdrawal at the ATM.
I can't fix it.
We'll get into breaking that down with our acceptance criteria as something is not vague.
They'll charge you $500.
Generally speaking, when you break these down, you want to break them into as much as you can vertical slices. As I mentioned, it's important to know how the stories relate to each other. But we're not talking about separate stories for testing and database changes and stuff like this. Now you can use
can you hit
these tools for things like that, but that's not our focus here.
Key?
Our focus here is specifications.
It's the one that's next to control.
Looking at the example of cash withdrawal. In order to get money when the bank is closed as bank customer, I want to withdraw cash from the ATM. This is actually the beginning of Gherkin. We have something called feature.
Does your computer still work?
It's got a title called cash withdrawal.
Okay, so go to start.
It's got some amount of text. In this case, it's in a user story format. Now, what I'd like you to do, this is our next exercise, is to work on the cash withdrawal story. We're going to identify where cash withdrawal to concede. We're just going to do titles right now, and then where they can fail. Okay? And if we had multiple groups, we'd share it with a larger group, but we're sharing it with everybody as we go. Okay, so
turn it off. Delete your Juno.
Let's go to our next exercise.
Never log
the
into
titles
it again.
Exercise. All right. So,
Mr. David E. Norman at gmail.com.
What are some ways that we can, some generic ways that we can succeed with withdrawing cash?
Yeah.
Think of pieces of it.
Nowhere.
Like have money in my hand?
We're working with an ATM.
Gmail.com.
What are we going to do? We withdraw cash from the ATM.
Email.
What are some, or if you want to think about how it can fail.
Get cash at the ATM with my debit card.
Literally now.
Okay, let's be a little more specific.
Well, you asked for a title.
Yes, no, but I want a little more specific title. This is for scenario. Think of it as a test.
Okay. I'm
Oh,
able
great.
to get cash
I'm not
from the
unmute.
ATM with my debit card.
Okay, so that means that the debit card is valid?
So we could do test cases for when it is and when it isn't in order to
Yes,
tease
okay.
that out.
All right, so valid debit card. Card. All right. That kind of makes us think about invalid debit card.
It makes you think what things can cause a debit card to be invalid.
Ah, better still. Okay, what can cause it to be invalid or valid?
Expiration comes to
Okay.
mind immediately.
Card expired.
Chipper malfunction.
I could also authorize incorrectly, or like enter the wrong PIN,
Okay,
the wrong zip code, things like that.
wrong PIN entered. Okay,
Chip
could be
on the
locked.
card is defective.
Yep, damaged card.
okay,
Sufficient balance and insufficient balance.
oh, good. Okay, so draw less than balance and withdraw more than balance, right?
Yep.
Now it's interesting. The bank will actually let me withdraw if I have insufficient balance in many cases, but then they
Oh,
they
that's
make me pay
a
for it.
different scenario.
All right.
That's if you've got overdraft protection.
Machine doesn't have enough cash.
Okay.
Insufficient cash in ATM.
Cash in ATM.
Of course, that only happens for Big Money Joel.
Ha ha. It can happen to anybody on a big holiday weekend if everybody's
Huh.
trying to grab money at the same time. Okay.
I don't know if this qualifies as a fail or as a feature.
What?
Amount requested is more than allowed to be withdrawn. This machine will
Okay.
never put out
Yes.
more than say $100 or something
Right.
like. It's a constraint.
Then daily balance.
Yeah, my debit card actually has that fraud protection. Like I can only get 500 a day or something stupid.
Yep. Okay. Daily balance limits are pretty reasonable.
I think someone kind of mentioned this, but like I keep my debit card locked through my app all the time.
Oh,
So if I want to use my card, my debit card, I have to go in and unlock it.
That's
this is something you do at the ATM, or is it something you do?
When I get to the ATM, I use the app on my phone to unlock the card.
Okay, so that's a different app. But let's see.
But it was it's
card locked.
Yeah, card locked.
by
Card
whatever means, right?
locked. Okay,
Yeah,
and there could
right.
be lots of reasons. You know,
Like you reported it stolen yesterday, and then you
Yeah.
found it in the
Mhm.
wallet this
could
morning.
be reported stolen. The Fed could be closing in on you because you're racketeering. There are all kinds of things. Or you could have just locked it and not have it unlocked yet.
Right.
Okay.
So this amounts to sketching out test cases.
That's
Good and
exactly
bad.
what this is.
Um,
So while we have these, we probably have the complementary one, card not expired.
It's going to be a really long string of givens.
No, these are separate titles. These are all separate tests.
So if you've got 5 in this category, these things must be true in order for you to be able to get money.
But we write them as separate tests.
Okay.
We write them as separate tests because we want all of our tests. We do not want our tests to be dependent on each other.
I get
Right.
it. Because
Okay.
if you say 5 things must be true and one of them's not, you have to figure out or be told which one is not.
Same thing with, if you're familiar with some of the general rules of unit testing, we don't want 50 asserts. That's also true here. And we'd want to try and keep things as simple. So, for instance, if we had a scenario for the wrong pin entered, some of the preconditions, which we're not going to put in our test, but would be probably in our step definitions somewhere, would be that the card hadn't expired. So we want to test these things discreetly and separately from one another. Make sense?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you see how this general approach works. Okay. And you can think of lots of other things that we could do here. Okay. So let's save this. And yes. All right. What am I doing here? Slideshow. There we go. Okay, so we did that. So for successful withdrawal, there are actually 2 scenarios here that we could have thought about. We thought about less than balance. There might have been one that was equal to balance. You might want to do something slightly different if it's equal to balance. You know, you might want to give someone some warning or what have you. Maybe some banks automatically close the account if it's equal to balance. I think most don't, but we talked about, so there anyway, so we got this first cut, and these are our scenarios, our titles, there are test titles. Okay, now our given, when, then. So what are these things? All tests have 3 parts. Doesn't matter what you're doing it in. If you're using Java, it's called assemble, act, assert. And I think if it's Ruby, it's assemble, activate, assert. But all languages have these 3 parts. If you are a formal tester, you're familiar with things that are preconditions. Then you've got an action or event. And you've got expected results or post conditions. So what is this all about? It's all about, we've got to set up our dependencies ahead of time for our test. And then something is going to make a different outcome than if it hadn't happened. And now we look at what's expected to happen and what side effects there are. And we call this given, when, then. Okay. So our given, and there are going to be a couple other keywords we can use. We can use and to combine things. We do not want to use and with when. Talk about that. So given is our setup, what needs to be true before we start testing our story. When, some action, usually some person or something new, and then what is the expected result and what happens. So how does this work? Our successful withdrawal was our first cut. Now for our second cut, what would that be? Say, given my account has a positive balance. That's vague, but it gives us a second cut. We're going to get more specific. When I withdraw cash, again, still vague, but now we know what we're doing, then the cash should be dispensed and my balance, this is one of the places that and is acceptable. My balance should be adjusted accordingly. Okay. Now we're going to take some of our scenarios and we're going to add some given when thens to them. And it's okay. And as a matter of fact, for this point, I want you to be a little bit vague on how we're doing this. Okay. And then we will get more concrete. So we had which scenario would we like to start with? Withdraw less than balance, card expired. What would we like to start with? We're gonna
Card
call
expired.
what?
Let's do card expired.
Card expired. Okay. So what's my given here?
Given expiration date of yesterday.
Given card has expiration date of yesterday.
So pedantic, but agreed.
Or you could just say in the past.
I like that easier.
Except you might end up with a test that works on Tuesday that doesn't work on Friday or something. like that.
That's true.
So yesterday might
Okay.
be better.
So
Doesn't matter though for this learning.
when what? When
Transaction
I
processed.
submit what?
Transaction processed.
Oh, well, okay, so I've got my card. I'm sticking it into the ATM.
Well, you wrote ATM software. Are you leading the witness?
No, I didn't write ATM software.
Oh,
I've written database management systems.
So it might
I've written
actually
network
be,
software. I haven't written ATM software.
what I'm thinking is the given, the words that we have following given right now should probably be the when statement, and the given part should simply be given customer inserts the card.
There we go.
It's
That's a
upon
good
that,
catch.
doesn't matter what they want to do. They can't do diddly squat. If you insert that card and it's got an expiration date that's in the past, you're out of here. Then the card should be returned and perhaps the message displayed, something to that effect.
and you're out of here is displayed on the screen
Yeah, kind of like that.
with Bob.
Okay.
And Bob says you're out of here.
And a verbal "get out" is said.
Yes. In an
Okay, and
internationalization, that might
rude
be the key
message is
word.
displayed because we will get specific on that.
Rude message
Huh?
There you go.
and outer case is electrified.
Okay, so. All right, what's another scenario?
We'd have to,
I mean, do you want a balance scenario? Do you want an insufficient cash scenario? Choose another scenario. either success or failure.
Hey, Camilla, I think there's one scenario we need to think about. Like, what if the person's a member or not a member? You might get a charge a fee.
What's that?
What if what if you need to check if they're a member of the bank or not a bank or not a member? If you're not a member and you use ATM, you'll get charged that transaction fee.
Okay,
Oh,
that's true,
member.
but that's another scenario. Right now, I want us to choose from the ones we have here. That's a
Right.
good point.
So you're over to the left.
Absolutely valid point.
Damage
But-
card.
Yeah. What's that?
Damage card? Is that okay scenario to select? Or does that have to be from the top three?
No, that's okay.
It's going to be very similar.
It's going to be
the
very similar to the one.
first one.
Well, what if it doesn't fit in?
If it's that damaged, you don't have a problem because the computer, the machine doesn't have to do anything because
Okay.
it doesn't have the card.
Yeah,
True.
let's assume that it's gotten it so that the first line's going to be pretty much the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, which speaks to code reuse.
Yes, it does. And this is going to be one of the reasons that when you're working with folks, and one of the reasons you want a good developer or a good tester, but particularly a good dev, trying to get the wording the same. Because if it's slightly different, when you go to create your step definitions, it will create two step definitions that mean the same thing. So it's important to get the wording the same, but we'll talk about that more next time. Okay, so given the card was inserted, and I assume that it can't read the strip, right?
Or the chip,
Okay,
because mostly they're not strips.
When
These-
card
Yeah.
is unreadable, or do you want specific?
yeah, okay, it's unreadable is good for now.
In real
because
life, you would
not
probably
being very specific.
in real life you would probably have different unreadable states.
Yes, in real life you would. And the card and a different rude message should be displayed.
More ruder.
So should that be when card readable or
Instead of
when card
and.
not readable?
Yes, it should be. Good catch. Card is
not.
unreadable.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. That fixes that. Let's have another quick one. How about something about money? Balance.
Insufficient cash in ATM is interesting.
Okay.
Pretty much anything that we do from here that isn't just about rejecting the card is going to take more steps simply because there's more involved.
Okay. So this part, we're starting at a different place.
Perhaps we could do that by declaring in the given a valid non-expired or however many qualifications you want to put into it, card is inserted so that we can dispense with all those other reasons we've already tested.
Right. So,
Valid transaction has started.
A valid card has been inserted.
Well, what about PIN code and all that stuff? Don't you want to get past that?
nope. We're just going to ignore that for the moment.
Yeah, if we want to get past all those dependencies, it would just be given the user has requested an amount of money, right?
Good. Given have requested valid amount of money. Okay.
An amount of money.
And yeah, because it's not going to make a difference.
Would I do that exceeds, or is that in the when?
I think that's probably going to be a function of the when. When the amount requested exceeds the amount available in the machine, I think is the case we're talking about.
Yep.
Mhm.
I hate when this happens. Don't you, Bub?
Yeah,
Daily, I encounter this. Do you?
Go away,
Me neither.
exceeds.
Because I keep requesting only pennies.
I request story points.
I think you got a new product
that.
market fit there.
Okay. Then no money should be dispensed, right?
yes. Well, it might be, what kind of a bank are you? It might be, yeah, we're going to give you as much as we've got, and say, I'm sorry, I can't give you the rest. Come back tomorrow.
But then you make all the other customers mad.
I think that would be against a lot of laws on that subject. And
A different
yet another rude message displayed, right?
Another.
That's-
Poor dad image is displayed.
Okay. All right.
So question for you, Camille.
Yes.
So I see that we're using like somewhat different language in places like sometimes I prefer to use first person language. So I make sure I'm
Mhm.
kind of writing these from a user perspective.
Yep.
Wonder about your thoughts on that.
I like writing things from whenever possible from the first person point of view,
Mhm.
unless you have a specific persona. Now,
Yeah.
for this case, the card is not a persona.
Right.
And anybody using an ATM is pretty much the same persona. But you could
Mhm.
imagine that there'd be other personas that would use the back end of the ATM machine to calculate daily withdrawals of
Mhm.
and so there might be some accounting type of persona and various other things. But for this one, yeah, I would use I whenever we're talking about a person.
So if you
Now
want
that's just my
really,
style.
Mhm.
so if the bank wanted to do really personalized banking, it might say something like, "Where's the $200 I gave you yesterday, Susan?"
Okay. Anyway. All right.
At least it's not HIPAA.
Okay. So we've written this from a business point of view, but we're not unambiguous, but we need them to be unambiguous, and we need concrete examples that are binarily testable. This is going to lead to the last exercise we're going to work on today. But let's look about how that changes. So if we remember before, we had given my account had a positive balance when I withdraw cash, then that cash should be dispensed and the balance of my account should be adjusted accordingly. Oops. And so now we take that and we say, given my account has been credited or has a starting balance, or however we want to phrase that, make sure it's the same. When I withdraw $20, then $20 should be dispensed and the balance of my account should be $80. Now, obviously, this was a very small account, and this is where the rubber meets the road in the concrete part. Now, in certain implementations of Cucumber or SpecFlow or whatever, you could actually use the $ with numbers. In other places, you probably want to use the word dollars or pounds or whatever denomination you're working in. The last group I was working with, everything was in pounds. And I didn't have a symbol on my keyboard for that, and I don't know if their Gherkin handles it anyway.
You don't want to know where the key is on their keyboard because it's different than yours.
I'm sure it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take one of those too vague second cuts. And we're going to flesh it out with some details. Which one do we want to work on?
Let's do damage card.
Okay. Well, what's the part that we need to be? Definitely rude message needs to be more explicit.
Yeah, that could be turned into a quoted string, or to say the rude message must contain, so that you're not too overly explicit in case you want to modify the language a little bit without breaking your test.
Okay, let's change that to,
I mean,
Uh.
we can make it explicit in more ways than one.
yep, and say, and a message is displayed, maybe saying what? Here,
Damage scarred. You might say something else, but that part has to be in the text.
that's good enough.
displayed.
If I could spell it,
I like that way of spelling. It's creative.
okay. And this was really fast. Let's try the insufficient cash.
The way you, the word say should probably be saying.
Displayed saying, yes. There we going. Something like that. This could have better English, but whatever we're going to do, we're going to use the same phrasing.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, how about insufficient, given that I've requested what? How much money?
$4.
Okay. And now let's phrase this and instead of the amount exceeds, and we know that it's going to exceed it, but the amount of money in the machine is $3
Sure.
after we get rid of the second fee. Then let's be explicit here. $0 should be dispensed.
Would you say $0 or would you say money would not be dispensed? Does it matter?
The reason that I would say $0 is because there are some cases where a certain amount of money that's not zero should be dispensed, and we can reuse this statement.
That's what I was thinking as soon as I asked the question.
Yeah. And let's change this one. Whoops. What did I just do?
I think you put it back to the way that it was.
You
But
doubled
you
the.
duplicated
doubled
the
the
card
yen.
should be returned.
Oh,
2 copies of that.
that's not what I intended to do.
You could probably generalize this to a rude message or a message displaying so-and-so.
There we go. That's better phrasing. Displaying. There we go.
And in real life, it's usually I've called it like this view is displayed.
Okay.
That way the graphic artist can figure out the rude message.
Displaying. What should we say? Insufficient funds in ATM? You got a better phrasing?
Transaction canceled, machine error.
Insufficient. Let's see, machine has insufficient bills to meet your request, something. How would you say that in even more terse terms?
ATM has no money.
Sufficient. Funds?
Yeah.
Okay,
ATM is your request has exceeded the amount the ATM can dispense.
Oh, that's a complicated word.
It doesn't
Right.
matter for the
it
example.
simple.
This is just an example in 10 years when people are watching this.
yeah, okay, so. And you can see what we do, because we're probably going past time already. What we do with card expired. You'd need to, so for dates, you need to give it a specific date. We need to do two things. We need to say what the date on the card was, and we'd also need to say what today's date was.
I think by doing that, you're going to, by definition, make your test fragile.
That means Bob can do a talk about stubbing and mocking.
That's true. And that's where you do that sort of thing. But we won't do that today, because we didn't get to that one. So we'll go back to this for now. And
Say,
Bob, why don't you give a talk later on stubbing and mocking?
I could do that. Yeah, actually, the emphasis that I would put on the examples that we just did
Mhm.
is that all the programmers and all the testers in the room need to keep very much in mind that the audience for that language is not us.
No, it's not. It's
It's the
business
subject
folks.
matter expert that came to us that wants us to solve their problem.
The parts that we need to do when working with them is we need to, one, make sure, because business folks, like many developers, think in happy path, is we need to work through them through the things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Although happy path has to work first or nothing else matters. And to make sure that the language is for the same usage, the same step, the given, the when, the then, the and, whatever, is identical. Except for, the numbers or the strings or what have you. Okay. So here's another thing with showing successful withdrawal equal to balance and an insufficient funds. And here's a message, and I should see a message containing insufficient funds. And this is the one equal to balance, and my ending balance should account should be $0. And we will continue further exploration into Gherkin, talking about rules, talking about what makes it good, what makes it bad, how do we simplify it, and many other things in next week. Do you have any
Wednesday.
questions?
18. And bring friends.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you're watching on YouTube, we're going to turn off the recording now. Hop on slack.cantcoders.org to talk to Camille directly. You don't even have to email her. She's on there. She'll respond. And it's 100 years from now and it's 2122. This is how we wrote software. And say hi to my great-grandchildren.
All righty.
I'm going to turn off the recording now and stop
Thanks,
streaming.
Camille.